Morning, Jared Dewiner. How are you? Today is March 2nd, 2020, and so we're gonna be continue on with our biology segment, and this is pretty much it. And it bridges biology with psychology slash mental health, and it's super important. Um, it's mental health is it affects all of us, and it's really an underserved, highly unrecognized problem. And so we're going to jump right into the weekly assignment, and there's a natural progression as well in terms of what we're doing here. So we did the theories of aging. We looked about why aging puts us at risk for so many problems. When cells die off in the brain, they're not replaced, and that's a big deal. So we did cancer, we did diabetes. We saw diabetes was a big risk for vascular disease, heart attacks and stroke, kidney disease, and then we get into Alzheimer's disease and what people need to know, people that research this and people that have devoted their lives to Alzheimer's research, they now refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes. Remember, we had type 2 diabetes. This was adult onset. It was genetic, but it was a lot lifestyle as well. And sadly, when we look at people that get Alzheimer's disease, um, roughly 80%, 80% of people that get Alzheimer's disease have diabetes. So if you live long enough with diabetes, the odds are really against you that you're going to probably someday get Alzheimer's. And it really has to do with the blood vessels that go into the brain. They get compromised in diabetes. The blood-brain barrier no longer exists or is not as well. That's an overstatement, but it doesn't screen things as well. And so the immune system invades the brain, creates inflammation and cell death. So it's a big deal. Alrighty, so what we're going to do right here is we were just again asking you to familiarize yourself with this disease process. We're going to look at mental health as well as Alzheimer's. Um, for again, what we have done is we've provided PDF files. Our preference is that you just go into the website right here. Okay, this right here is the PDF file that will go over mental health and behavioral issues as we get older. So if you click right onto that, the PDF file will pop up. Get my face out of the way here, and there it is. Okay, so we look at really the concerns that have, and people are kind of forgotten. We're going to talk about, yes, when you're younger, you're much more likely to suffer from bipolar disease and clinical depression, schizophrenia, but the consequences of depression are much greater when you look at people that are older, right? So we see that, still a high percentage of people over the age of 55 suffer from some type of mental health disorder. Okay, of course, it's appropriate when you look at the losses that people experience and the loss of independence. So we see right here when we look at people that are in nursing home residents acting that we see that the loss of independence really does increase the mental health problems. Okay, so we look at the consequences of mental health issues. Clinical depression is the major cause of mental health problems, and as indicated here, it's much higher in a nursing home, and it just goes through some of the symptoms. Okay, and a big deal is that is sadly you're much likelier to commit suicide when you get older, and so it's again for any age group that we have here that we're looking at. The older people, older Americans, are much more likely to commit suicide. So you need to be on high alert. Okay, alrighty. Alcohol abuse is a major problem as people get older. Okay, and it has to do again with self-medication for the depression, self-medication because of the loss you experience, for the social isolation and the loneliness that people experience. Okay, and sadly, when we look at alcohol, it causes serious health problems in the rest of your body, much greater than in older people. So it goes through chronic diseases and again, the need for having gerontology. So anyways, I just kind of throw that out there, and please go through and read that, okay? Then we ask you to go in and kind of like we have done before, it's great if you can just go in and kind of navigate on these amazing websites that the National Institute of Aging has put forth. All right, so we can look at causes of Alzheimer's, symptoms of Alzheimer's, the current treatment of Alzheimer's. There's a couple of this is a little more icon driven. And Alzheimer's is not the only form of dementia. You can have little tiny strokes. You can have kidney disease. Oftentimes, people are severely clinically depressed, and they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But if you treat the depression, then the dementia goes away. So there's lots and lots of different uh, uh, reasons for getting dementia. If you do know somebody that's having a dementia for whatever cause, please go in here and check out the clinical trials. Okay. All right. So that's what that's all about. And then we have a couple of videos that we kind of ask you to look at. This one here is the epidemiology, where we're looking at the numbers. Sadly, you're getting to the point. You'll see as you go through this, the millions and millions of people that have Alzheimer's disease, projections out into, we put a couple of things down here, right here, to kind of reflect that. We look at the projections, 5.8 million people in 2019, and we started approaching 5% of the population. It's crazy. 1 in 10 people over the age of 65, 10% are going to have Alzheimer's. And it's predominantly a female issue. 2/3 are women. It is driven by socioeconomics, and we see that right in there with the African American and Hispanic groups. And then we're going to go from 5.8 million to 13.8 million. This is going to be a huge burden on all of you. Okay. All righty. So then you can either access this information by going into the second sheet right here. Okay, so this second sheet is the Alzheimer's fact sheet, and it provides reading that supports the videos. It tells you exactly what's going on in terms of the causes of dementia and the history behind it. Obviously, you have severe brain loss. This is a degenerative disease. It's chronic, and there's no reversing it. Sadly, the drugs that we have, they are like Band-Aids that barely treat the symptoms. There's very little progress, sadly, on this, because it's a difficult disease to develop drugs, because the course of the disease can be 20 years long. Unlike cancer, you develop a drug, and within 2 months whether or not the cancer drug is working. It takes years of watching patients, and so sadly, a number of drug companies have dropped their research into Alzheimer's because it costs too much money to run trials that last 5-10 years and then have the drug not work. Whereas a cancer drug, and you run a trial that lasts a month, and so that's a big difference. Okay. Alrighty. So the brain, Pfizer was one of the biggest pharmaceutical company in our country, and it dropped their Alzheimer's and Parkinson's research programs because it was too costly. All right, so we can look at the signs. Okay, so and you just read through this, and you can start thinking about what's going on. We're looking for biomarkers, but the current biomarkers are just looking at imaging, whether it's this kind of imaging or another imaging where we can actually look at proteins in the brain, but they're super expensive, so it's not standard of care. Okay, all righty. You're going to look for behavioral issues, and that's how it gets diagnosed. Cognitive issues like trouble with words, getting lost, so visual spatial issues. And everybody's different, and so it just depends on the person. You're gonna have diagnostics based on the symptoms, mild, moderate, and severe. Okay, and the underlying cause, as you're progressing through these, has to do with the death of the neurons. And there's still controversy in terms of what's going on in terms of death of neurons. We are looking at the development of what are called plaques and tangles, but it's not clear if that's what's the horse and the cart on that. Is something preceding going on in the brain that causes these plaques and tangles? We know that you get atrophy of the brain. Like I said before, we have inflammation and vascular damage. This is totally related to the development of diabetes and why diabetes is such a risk. And then diabetes causes free radical damage, mitochondrial dysfunction. Remember that from the early stuff, okay? And if you don't have good energy in your brain cells are crying out for blood supply, oxygen, and glucose. then they're going to die off as well. Okay. There's some genetic risk. There's a couple of inherited versions of Alzheimer's where you get it in your 40s. Very rare. Anywhere from 1 to 5% of cases. And then there's and that's an automatic. So it's called an autosomal dominant. That means if your parent got this kind of early onset dementia, there's a 1 in 2 chance that you're going to get it. The other kind is called a recessive gene. This one right here, ApoE, it has to do with a protein that's real important for not only carrying fats, cholesterol, and triglycerides all throughout the blood. Okay, so it's a risk for also as well for cardiovascular disease, but it's also real important for clearing some of the debris in the brain, some of the components that make up the plaques. And you can have this gene, and there's different levels. So you can get one from mom and dad, and you're at much higher risk. So 40% of the cases are high risk, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it. So it seems to interact with the environment, and that gets you to the next point down here. Okay. All right, so this goes through the diagnosis. What you're going to do is called a mini mental status exam. Okay. Um, if you're in a clinical trial, there are some brain scans might be done. Again, these are really expensive, so unlikely unless you're in a trial. Okay. We're going to carry out blood tests and urine analysis to rule out other problems that can be reversible. If you have kidney disease, you're going to have dementia, but we can reverse it by getting rid of the kidney disease. Okay. Liver disease, things like that. All right. Okay. Importantly, as we come down here, we talk about how it's treated. We have these drugs that are not that great. They're not that great. Okay, and they only work in the early stages of Alzheimer's. They do not stop the progression. They just kind of treat the symptoms a little bit. Okay. We're looking for better treatments, and that's what this is all about. And then this right here is part of your discussion, and that has, what kind of support is out there for family members that have to be caregivers, because this is a huge burden. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars will be spent for supporting your family member that has Alzheimer's disease, much less the emotional toll that it takes on you, where you're caring for your parent or grandparent, your own children, trying to work, the missed days at work. It's all really, really, really tough. So if you know somebody that's having these issues, certainly contact them. And then we have our own caregiver resource center at USC as well that I encourage you to contact. Okay, so we're going to go back here to the assignment here. Okay, this is just some facts going, that kind of help support what I was talking about. Again, you guys are at highest risk for suffering from major depression. You can look at your age group right here. This is 13 to 15, 16 to 18, 19 to 21. So this is when your brain's reorganizing after becoming an adult and going through puberty. Okay. We see the major depression risk goes down like so. Now we did see that there's a categorization that major depression is a different category than just general depression categorization. Sorry about that. Okay. Alrighty. We do see though, even though this is the high risk group for having depression, which makes life difficult, we see right here the high risk group for suicide. We're looking at suicide by males. Okay, right here. All right. Comparing, and we see this is a pretty steady thing. We see as you get older, you're much more likely to commit suicide. And we can then come down here and look at looking at gender and ethnicity in terms of suicide rates. And again, men are much more likely than women to commit suicide. It has everything to do with our testosterone and how it modulates our brain function. And we see kind of a differential in terms of ethnic groups. Okay. Again, this is the scary part that we talked about at time of Alzheimer's, about how, obviously we've told you over and over again that people are living longer. And the consequence then is that the longer you live, the more likely that you're going to have dementia. This is the number of people per 100. And you see you get out here into the 90s years of age. And then you start, approaching 4 out of every 10, which is crazy, 40%. These are scary numbers. So after age 85, you start getting up to 1/3 of people. Okay, alrighty. So That's everything. And we piggybacked um, the discussion this week on this as well, and some really compelling videos. This is a great video. It shows you the of um, power of music therapy. Maybe some of you guys are musicians, and this is an awesome, awesome new career path. Medical centers everywhere in the world, everywhere across our country, now have departments of music therapy that are used for people that have serious health issues, cancers, and dementia. And you'll see how music really, really lights up the brain. It's temporary, but it's something. Okay, so after you get done with this, I want you guys to start thinking about what can be done to help people like you guys. There's a good chance that you're going to have to deal someday with a friend or a family member that has Alzheimer's, and what can we do to make it easier on you? All right. All right. So that's where that is for this week. The only thing that's coming up in the near future is we have the critical thinking assignment coming up over here, okay, March 30th. You guys should also be looking at your midterm exams, okay? So this is this week right here, okay? So again, just open up multiple browsers, take your time, and you're gonna do fine. The way the midterm exam works, okay, is you have all week long to designate a 2-hour slot, okay? There's a clock in Blackboard, okay? Once the exam is started, you have 2 hours and you cannot go back, okay? That's it. All right, so it's not like you can do 5 minutes now and 5 minutes tomorrow and 5 minutes the next day. You have 2 hours from the time you started, okay? I want you guys to be clear on that. All righty, cool. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.